Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2015 Heartland Wilderness Travel trailer, we're going to be showing you how to install the Solera Slide-Out Awning. But before we do that, let's just take a minute. We'll check this out and make sure it's what you're looking for. So these slide toppers are available in a bunch of different sizes. This particular one is 79 inches wide and black in color, but they're also available in white and a whole bunch of different sizes. So whether or not this particular one is going to work for your exact setup kind of just depends on what you got going on. And here in a moment, I'll show you how to measure and figure that out to make sure you get the right size for your particular application. The whole point of a slide topper is a really simple concept. It's just going to give you a layer of protection on the top of your slide out or your bump out. Because what can happen, you know, without a slide topper on here, when you have this out and you're at the campsite, a lot of times you're in nature, right? And you can get leaves, water, sticks, debris, all that type of stuff, you know, piled up and built up on the top of your bump out. And then what tends to happen after a while, you know, it sits, kind of starts getting gross, getting mildewy, things like that. And even if it don't sit, when you have that stuff on there and you go to put your bump out or your slide out back in, it drags it all along with it, kind of bringing some of that stuff to the inside. A lot of times it can start to tear up these seals and you know, you'll end up having issues there. So by having a slide topper on here, all that rain, you know, hit it, rinse right off. If you happen to have any debris or sticks up there, whatever the case may be, when you put this in, it'll simply just kind of roll off the end of it, keeping this clean. And my thought is too, especially on super hot days, this might help keep things a little bit cooler too. Instead of the sun just pounding directly down onto the top of your slide out, you know, this might diffuse it a little bit. But that's just my thought. Even though it's black, I think it should help in that regard. And I think something like this is really important, especially for those of you who leave your camper, your trailer, set up for quite some time. And my father is a perfect example that he has a farm in northeast Missouri, has his fifth wheel, and that pretty much stays set up the majority of the year, right? And so it would acquire a lot of trash and debris and stuff on the top of his bump out if he didn't have one of these. So, you know, since he does have all these set up on his, when it is time to close up and move it, he really don't have to worry about getting all this junk off the top of there and tearing up his seals. To figure out what size awning is going to work for your particular slide out or your particular bump out, it's pretty easy to figure that out. What you'd want to do is measure from the outer edge of the trim to the outer edge of the trim and kind of go from there. A lot of these awnings, you know, they'll work for several different measurements, all right? And something else you gotta look for too, you will need 7 inches of clearance, right, from your bump out where it actually comes out. So in our case, we were pretty much spot on. We had a little extra breathing room there, but if you don't have that 7 inches of clearance, what you can do is go down to the next size. And what that'll do is kind of draw everything in a little bit tighter, but it'll still give you plenty of coverage and completely cover the top of your slide out. Something else you want to look for too, if you happen to have two slide outs really close to each other, like this one here, how we have it set up, you're going to want at least 14 inches between the two. We fell within that range, so we're in good shape. If yours are even tighter together, then again, you can go down to that next size and kind of bring everything in a little bit closer, giving you that space you need to get everything installed and still having coverage at the top. And that's what I meant by that clearance originally, you know. So let's say, for example, if we were trying to do this one and the end of the camper was right here, we didn't have that 7 inches, maybe we had like 3 or 4, for example, that's a scenario of where you'd want to go down to the next size. Here's what the slide topper awning looks like whenever your bump out is pushed all the way in. And it's pretty low profile, you know, pretty standard for what you see on campers and RVs. It does roll it up nice and tight. the way that everything's attached, it comes with the brackets. They're made from aluminum, so you're not gonna have to worry about corrosion issues and things like that. And pretty well made for the most part. You know, with these, I don't really have a ton of complaints as far as the quality of construction goes. That even holds true for the fabric. You know, for being exposed, and you know, after years of you know, kind of wear and tear on these, they seem to hold up pretty well. For whatever reason, if you get a big branch or something that comes down on it, tears it up, you can get just the replacement fabric for these too. So if that unfortunately were to happen to you, you don't have to get a whole entire new assembly and kind of start from scratch, so to speak. Something I do want to mention too, a lot of times, especially when these are brand new and they're rolled in, you might see a little bit of wrinkle action going on here. And I've done quite a few of these things and, you know, drove myself crazy trying to get rid of them whenever everything's bumped in. You know, you'd see one, you could make an adjustment, think you get rid of it, pull it out, bring it back in, you get a new wrinkle, and you just kind of go back and forth with yourself. So what I like to do is get it really close, you know, as long as everything looks square when you have it fully extended out. Over time, what tends to happen, you know, the more you use it and once it gets some sun on it and stuff, it usually kind of works all those wrinkles out on its own. So just wanted to mention that from something I've dealt with in the past. As far as the material goes, you know, I mentioned it a minute ago, it is going to be made from vinyl, and it's a little bit thicker than a lot of the other ones that are available. So in the long run, that just means it's going to last longer, right? Stay in better shape, hold up to extreme cold a little bit better, make it easier to clean, things of that nature. And it's going to be able to extend up to 48 inches, which is usually more than enough for just about any size slide out. Aside from that, you know, it's pretty straightforward. I think these are a great addition to campers, RVs, things like that. Just offering that little bit of extra protection, you know, helps keep your investment clean and in good working order, and help keep other parts in good shape as well. You know, as far as the installation goes, from my experience, it really just depends on what size awning you're dealing with, right? A smaller one like this one here, really not too bad. I still had to have someone give me a hand when actually putting this up in place. But you know, the larger ones like this one I got behind me here, those are just a little more cumbersome, but the concept is going to be the same, regardless of what size one you need. You mount up your brackets, you know, make sure everything's level. I'll show you a couple tips and tricks that I've learned after doing these to make things a little bit easier. Put the fabric in, you know, more or less bump it out, bring it back in, make sure you're happy with it, and that's really all there is to it. It will come with everything that you're going to need to install it, other than some sort of sealer, right? Because where you attach the brackets to your camper, you do want that to be sealed back there. That way you don't get water inside and leak. I like to use what's called butyl tape. That's kind of my favorite, but I'm sure there's other alternatives that you could use as well. So that's entirely up to you. But, you know, with that said, if this is something you want to do yourself, hang around. If not, you can always use our dealer locator network, and that can help you find a shop near you that can set this up for you. But like I said, hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on this one now. To begin our installation, we're going to be over here by our bump out where we're going to get the slide topper installed. And what I like to do is just try to get the camper level. It seems just to make more sense to me to do it that way. And then you can identify if you have this little rail installed or not already, because some of these will come right out of the factory with the rail portion already in place. Ours does not have it. If yours does, you can skip this step. So you kind of luck out there, but since ours don't, we have to install this. And so all I do is I measure the length of this, split the difference. So I find the center point right. I just put a mark there. And then I measure the length of our bump out split the difference, put a mark there, and that at least lets me know that we can get this centered and have it look good. As far as the placement goes, usually, you'll have another bump out with one of these installed on it already, 9 times out of 10, at least from my experience. And so what I like to do is kind of check that out, and have something to work off of. And that's exactly what I did here. Compared it to our other awning. And you want to drop it down a little bit, but be up a little bit from the actual bump out. There is a minimum and maximum number listed in the instructions, but I usually go down an inch or so, and that seems to be pretty spot on. And so what I'll do is hold this and then make sure it's level and the same distance away from everything. And once I'm happy with that, I'll come back with a pencil and mark our openings here where we're going to get this secured. Before we actually, attach this to our camper, I am going to take some butyl tape and put it on the back side of it. That way when we drill through, everything will stay sealed. And I clean the back of this off with rubbing alcohol, let it dry. We'll do the same thing on the camper side. And then with this stuff, I'm just going to lay it all the way down our rail here. Get this backing paper peeled off here. And if we flip this over, what you can do is take a screw and just kind of poke it through the hole. That way we can kind of clear that out a little bit and be able to line it up with the marks that we made. And these are the screws that we're going to be using. These ones here, and as far as the bit that goes in there, it's going to be a number 2 square bit. Now that we're all prepped, we can take the rail, make sure we have it all lined up. And one thing that's kind of nice with this butyl tape is it almost acts as like a 2-sided sticky tape in a sense, so you can get it pretty close, push down where you want it, it'll somewhat stay in place. So I'm just going to start in the middle and work my way out, making sure that everything stays aligned. At this point, you can grab the roller assembly, and you're going to have 2 of these metal pieces here. And on one end of them, there will be a hole. And if you look where these little arms are, we'll slide in there and those holes will line up. And we're going to secure this down using this big self-tapping screw. I'm using a Phillips head number 3 bit. And one thing I've learned with these is I try to get it kind of started by hand. You'll kind of feel it line up, if you will. And then I just slowly run these down. I usually kind of go until I hear it catch a couple times and then back it off, run it down a little bit more. More or less, this is kind of cutting its own threads. So by doing that, I'm kind of pulling that old, the old metal shavings out, and it just seems to work a little bit better. So with that one done, we'll do the same exact thing for the other side of your roller. What we can do now, each corner, top corner of our bump out, we can get the access plates installed. And with these, you can position them pretty much any which way you want. What's going to fit the best on your particular setup. You can put them in the corner, you can put them, on the actual T-molding. The instructions give you a few different configurations, and what I always end up doing, and it seems to be the most common, at least from my experience, is just going here in the corner. Sometimes you might not be able to butt it up perfectly flush into that corner just because of the way some of the trim pieces are. It's not a huge deal. Just make sure that it's going to be square and level and everything else if you do have to lower it down a little bit or push it to the side just a hair. So You know, I did that. This is where we're gonna go. Made sure it was level. And then just like our rail up here, what I did was make a few marks where the holes are gonna be. That way we can keep track of it and know where we need to secure this. Once you figure out the placement, you know, you'll have one on each side and you'll set these up the same way. But I put some more butyl tape on the back here, poke the holes in it where our attachment points are going to be. And what you're going to use to attach it will be these screws like this. They have a tapered head. That way when you run these down, they'll be flush with our bracket. And I'm going to use a number 2 square head bit to secure those down. Took our bracket, got it lined up, pushed it in place, and like I said, that butyl tape will kind of keep it there somewhat for you. Make sure it's lined up and get it secured. We can prep these brackets now, and those parts that we just put on our bump out, you know, they have little tracks in them, and these brackets will sit in those tracks. Now you can, you know, there's 2 different positions, you know, one that's going to make this sit up a little bit higher and one that's going to make it sit down a little bit lower. And you can use either one really, whichever one's going to work best for you. I think in our particular situation we're going to use the top ones here. And what I like to do, since, you know, we're not going to be up on a ladder, try to do as much as I can on the ground. We're going to have these little set screws, all right? And they use a 1/8 head Allen key. I'm going to put these in here on the top portion. If you were to use the other tracks, you know, where this would be down more, you'd put them down here. But I'm just going to get these started, a few threads, that way they're kind of in place and ready for us to go. It'll make it a little bit easier when we're putting everything together. We'll grab these pieces now and slide them onto the tracks here from this plate like we talked about. We're just going to leave them loose for now. That way if we need to make any adjustments, we can do so with ease. And then you want to come up to one of the ends, or you can do both of them if you want, of this track here where our fabric is going to get slid into when we go to put everything together. And the very end of it, I like to just take a screwdriver or a pair of pliers or something and just open it up a little bit. That way it's easier to get everything kind of started, if you will. And then, not a bad idea either, you take a little sandpaper or file, you just knock down any rough edges, that way it don't get tore up. You know, if it catches on a burr or something like that, it's nice and smooth. And then what helps get the fabric bead in here is just a little lubricant. I'm gonna use some silicone spray. And instead of just blasting it everywhere, making a huge mess, I usually just soak one end of a paper towel with it and kind of just run it through that track. And that'll just help everything go together a lot easier. If you grab your fabric now, what we can do is take it loose about 1 turn here. That way we have some room to work and we're able to actually slide this up into position. And just so it don't continue to want to unravel on us and everything, I'm just going to take a little bit of painter's tape and kind of do one of these deals. I'd still be careful, you know, you don't want this thing to unravel because you have some other issues, but this will probably help out a little bit. So it definitely helps if you have someone who can give you a hand with this part. Well, what we can do is take our fabric and start to slide it into the channel. Just kind of slowly feed it in place. and continue to work it all the way down. You know, you might have to stop halfway or something and have your friend reposition their ladder just to make things more manageable. Once you get pretty close here where the little arm that we installed, this rod, once that gets within reach of the bracket that we put up here, when you continue to slide it across, you can guide that end into the rod, and then we'll push it all the way over, be able to do the same thing for the other side, you know, push it back in. So it's just a matter of getting everything lined up and in position here. With this all loosely in place now, these brackets, the ones that we put those set screws in loosely, gotta make sure those are pushed all the way over as far as we can get them, and then come back with our 1/8 inch Allen key and tighten those set screws down. You want to make sure that our assembly is centered, and so how I do that is I just measure from the end to the end of our bump out, make sure it's the same on both sides, and usually you can get it pretty close just by eyeballing it, but it's always good to check. That way you make sure you're right on. And once you find that, this extension arm that we slid into this bracket, there's going to be 2 holes in it, all right? And you're going to have 4 of these self-tapping screws, so 2 of them for each side, and we'll secure these down into here. That way this will all stay put. Now when you're doing this, what I found, if you just kind of carelessly run these things down in here with a bunch of force, a lot of times you'll break them. So what I like to do is start to drill it in, you know, nice and slow. You'll feel the threads start to catch. You'll work it a couple threads, back it out, work it in a few more, back it out, so on and so forth. Just be patient. That way you don't break this off, and then you have to drill another hole and you know, figure some things out. So we'll go ahead and get that done on each side. We can get these little covers in place now, and these are just going to slide into this bracket in the grooves. And it definitely helps, just like kind of how we did with this top rail. If you just run a piece of sandpaper through here, kind of clean out any of the rough spots, because these can get really tight. And then I put some silicone spray in there too. But these are just going to go in that groove. I'll just work them into position. So like you saw, when I was getting these in, it came a point where they're really tight, and I took my screwdriver handle and was using it to tap it in. And honestly, I kind of prefer that because it has enough weight to it to where it actually moves this, and it's somewhat soft where it's not going to, you know, bang the cover up or anything, and not heavy enough to where if you hit it once, it'll break apart. You know, if you grabbed a hammer or something and wasn't really careful, you'd probably damage this. So that's just something that I've done in the past, and it seems to work out pretty well. We can look at the ends now, and we'll have these silver pins. Those are little locks keeping the tension off of our spring roller. So what you want to do is just grab the roller with your hand, you know, and you can roll it up a little bit. You can kind of feel it start to have tension on it. And we can pull these ends out, and you want to keep your hand on it, so and not just let it go. So this thing is under a lot of tension. But I did the other side already. The way you get these out, you just take a pair of pliers, pull straight back. Then once you have both of them out, you can slowly, start to let the roller do its thing. Now that this is under its own tension, it's not going to be perfect right away by any means. Sometimes you can kind of eyeball it. The fabric might come off the roller at an angle one way or the other. Sometimes you can take the tension off and kind of move it over by hand to try to square it up if need be. But usually it's pretty close. I feel like one of the better ways to get everything centered and everything is to actually operate the bump out, and it'll usually kind of do it on its own. So whenever you go to operate your slide in and out, it's not a bad idea if you can have someone, on the outside kind of keeping an eye on things, just in case if it gets way off centered or anything like that happens, so you're not just looking at it blind here. And I like to just take it slow. If you need to go out a foot or whatever like this, kind of check things out and kind of go from there. After, opening the pump out and closing it several times, everything looks great. And for the most part, usually the slide topper will center itself up. With that said, if it's really close and you need to make an adjustment, you can do it like we did before we even opened it, by just turning, grabbing the tube there, taking some tension out, and you can pull this from side to side. A lot of times what can happen too, you'll be dead on as far as this being center and everything, but you might have a little crease in the middle. And what I found, what you can do, if you secure one side down and then come over to the other side, put a little bit of tension on it, you can usually pull that crease out. So just something I've ran into in the past. But we're really happy with how this is set up here. And so what we're gonna do, the kit's gonna give you 2 real small self-tapping screws. We wanna run this down in through the channel, through the fabric, and through the little tube that the fabric's around. Pretty close to the edge. And you just wanna be careful and take this slow. And this will keep this upper portion held in place here. And something else I like to do, the very end that we kind of spread out a little bit when we were putting the fabric in, I just take a pair of pliers, just kind of lightly pinch that back closed a little bit. With all of that complete though, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Solera Slide-Out Awning on our 2015 Heartland Wilderness Travel Trailer.